In this episode, we're going to be cooking some soul-warming pea and nettle fritters. They're one of our favourite dishes. They're also completely vegan, so they're a great option for people who are trying to be a little bit more conscious about what they're eating.
This series is all about wild seasonal ingredients and the rich smoky flavours that fire can bring to your cooking.
We want to reintroduce you guys into the art of cooking in the great outdoors, using forgotten ingredients, mouth-watering recipes to create a true feast over fire. This is Fire, Smoke and Iron.
We feel that nettles may have a bad reputation because of their stinginess, but for something that is so widely available, so delicious and incredibly nutritious, it's crazy that we're not using it more in our kitchens. So one of the stumbling blocks that people may see is the fact that they are so stingy. So when we're picking them, we always recommend that you don a glove and use this just to prevent your hands from getting stung. What we do is we pick the first 4 to 6 leaves just at the tips. Not only is this texturally a lot better, but it's also where all of the nutrients lie. So whilst nettles are readily available all year round, what you really mustn't do is pick them when they go to seed. Once they've gone to seed, they start to produce a substance that actually can interfere with our kidney function. It's really good for the birds and the butterflies, but not so good for us. So just be sure to pick the younger tips kind of earlier on in the year, or be sure to be picking nettles that maybe have been trimmed down in a garden verge or something, so that you can be sure to be eating the best part of the plant. So here in the woods we can find so many natural materials that are great for fire lighting, such as twigs and sticks and pine cones. One of the things that we really like to use are a fungus that grows on dead standing wood called a Daldinia Concentrica, which is also called King Alfred cakes. They are absolutely brilliant at catching a spark, which really helps to nurture the embers and helping to light your tinder.
Now we've got a nice strong fire going, we're going to use that heat to boil up some water, and then we're going to blanch off our nettles and peas ready for our fritters. Got a nice big pan of water, and we're just going to add a big pinch of salt to that. Whilst that water's boiling, we're going to make a wild garlic seed caper tartar sauce to go with our fritters. So first, just going to grab a bowl, and to that bowl we're going to add 4 to 5 tablespoons of mayonnaise. Now if you want to keep this dish vegan, then you can get a vegan or plant-based alternative. 1 teaspoon of Dijon mustard, and we're going to go in with a little pinch of salt. Next up, we're going to add our wild garlic capers. We pick and salt these at the end of the season, and then we pickle them for the year ahead. If you can't get hold of them, then using normal capers is absolutely fine. We're just after that salty, briny flavour to add to our sauce. So we're going to add in 2 teaspoons of those. And then we've got some dried wild garlic, but this could be dried parsley. And then lastly, we're just going to grate in some cornichons. These are going to add a nice pickly back note to our sauce. We're going to add in 3 of those. And we're just going to give that a nice stir together, make sure everything's nicely mixed. And then we'll just give it a little taste. We'll add a touch more black pepper. You only need a very little amount of salt, as the cornichons and the capers are quite salty themselves, so it's just a case of balancing that flavour out. And then this we'll just leave to the side, ready for our nettles when they've finished cooking later on. With the wild garlic tartar sauce done, we can crack on with our fritters. So these fritters are great, they're perfect for all meal times. They're also really economical and a great way to use up all the odds and ends of veg you have left in your fridge at the end of the week. The water's now at a nice rapid boil, and we want it to be bubbling quite ferociously. And we're going to put our peas in first to blanch, followed quickly by our nettles. Just going to give it 30 seconds or so before we go in with our nettles. The blanching of the nettles is going to remove any of the sting as well, so you don't have to worry about stinging your mouth or your fingers afterwards. Just be careful at this point before we put them in. So we're going to use our tongs to just take them out of the bowl and into the water. Another stir just to amalgamate everything. And we're going to pop the lid back on and give it about a minute. Whilst the pan comes back up to a boil, I'm just going to grab a nice big bowl ready to make our batter. And we've got a bowl of cold water, which we're going to put our drained peas and nettles into as well. And putting our drained nettles and peas into cold water is going to stop the cooking process and really lock in that vibrant green colour. The peas have had their minute now, blanching along with the nettles, so we're just going to pull them out and plunge them straight into our cold water. So once we pulled the peas and nettles from the pot, we're just going to put the lid back on and remove it to make space for our skillet for when we come to cooking. And we're just going to rest that to the side of the fire and let it come up to temperature nice and slowly. It doesn't need to be blasting hot because we're going to add oil to it and lightly cook these fritters. We're going to take our big bowl and I'm just going to sift in some ground flour, which is ground chickpeas. And the sifting is just going to remove any sort of big lumps and make it easier to mix in. I'm going to put in a nice pinch of salt, a few twists of black pepper, a teaspoon each of cumin seeds and onion seeds, and they're just going to add a really nice little bite of flavour. We're just going to stir just to incorporate and mix through our flour. So we're going to cut through 3 spring onions nice and finely and kind of rattle through them. Keep them nice and thin, or as thin as you can get them. It doesn't matter if you have a few bigger than the others, they're going to cook relatively quickly anyway, so it's not too big of an issue. Let's go straight in. And then we've got half a chilli. And again, just slice it nice and thinly. So, to our batter base, we're going to add in water. And we're going to mix in just enough to bind this batter together. We want kind of like a thick pancake consistency. So that we'll add in nice and slowly, combining all the water. Making sure to get all of the dry bits of flour from around the bowl. It's always easy to add water, but it's really hard to take away without adding more and more flour. So we just add it until we get a nice kind of dropping consistency off the whisk. And now we're going to drain our peas and nettles to mix in. And then we're going to add all of this into our batter and stir it through the mix. And now we're just going to stir those through the batter, trying to get everything really nice and well coated. So our batter's all nicely mixed together, so now we're going to get them on cooking over fire. Just before we jump into cooking our fritters, we're just going to get our fire in order. We're going to move some of these bigger logs to the side and pull the charcoal and the burning embers just into a nice bed. Got a nice radiant heat, and then we can push our pan over that nice warm spot. And we're going to add in some oil. So we know we've got a nice warm pan if our oil shimmers as soon as it hits. And that's what you're looking for. And it kind of, it's this sort of little dimple effect over the oil. And that means the pan's nice and warm. The oil's not going to reduce the temperature of that pan too much. So we're just going to use a tablespoon to add in spoonfuls of our batter. Doing a few at a time. We don't want to overcrowd the pan at this point, so we want to keep it nice and hot. And they're just going to sizzle away 2 to 3 minutes each side. But as always, when cooking over fire, it's hard to give any real concrete timings. We're just going to look for a nice golden colour underneath before we flip it, and then cook it for a similar amount of time on the other side. The fritters have had a few minutes now, so we're just going to have a look underneath and see if we can flip them. So they're nice and loose off the pan, and they're really nice and golden underneath. So we're just going to give them a little flip. If your pan's on a slight slant because of the ground underneath it, just give your pan a spin and it'll keep your heat nice and even. So our fritters are pretty much there. They've had 3 or 4 minutes either side. They're beautifully golden. We're just going to take them off, put them on a nice lined cloth to soak up any residual oil. The fritters are perfectly golden on both sides, and when you push them, there's no sort of residual batter coming out, so we know that they're cooked through. We're just going to let them rest by the fire, but not too close, just to keep them nice and warm whilst we cook another batch. Our fritters are finished cooking, we're going to plate them up. We're just going to take our fritters from the warm spot of the fire and we're going to pile them onto our platter. Then we're just going to finish with some nice thin slices of green chilli for a little extra kick of heat. And we've got some sprouting broccoli shoots as well, which Becky grew herself, but these could be pea shoots, any kind of microgreen. And then lastly, we've got our wild garlic seed tartar sauce, which you can serve in the bowl or kind of add dollops all over, and then we can finish with just the last little flourish. Here we have it, guys, one for the vegans and the vegetarians. This is our soul-warming pea and nettle fritters with a wild garlic seed caper tartar sauce. If you've enjoyed today's episode and you create this dish at home for your friends and family, we'd love for you to share it on social media. So that's it for today, guys. I really hope you enjoyed today's episode. Don't forget to subscribe. We'll be back next week with some mouth-watering pork belly and crispy squash potatoes.